So, Paul, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Glad to share some time and some old news.
Yeah, well, I mean, and your experiences and your wisdom. So, before we kind of dive into it, you are the author of a book called Blackout: My 40 Years in the Music Business. I mean, you have had a storied career. You've had tremendous highs. You've had really challenging lows. I mean,
Uh-huh.
you know, you really kind of did it all. So before we kind of delve into how you were able to deal with all of that and achieve those tremendous successes, like, share with us your journey, share with us your story, because it's not really a traditional route, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess, I grew up in New York in the 60s. And, back then in my neighborhood in Queens, I lived near Kennedy Airport. The only things you were supposed to do were go to the Army or become a policeman or a firefighter or something like that. And luckily, two of the parents on my block were both in the music industry.
Did you ever think of it as like a viable career? Like, what? I mean, obviously you were
Oh no,
passionate about
I played basketball in high school and college.
right.
And back then, I'm supposed to be going to the NBA. I got a free ride to college, but that ended in about 2 years. I was on the back of the bench, and the college radio station was fun back then. It was something I never thought of as a career. I never thought to go to broadcasting school. But at Northeastern University up in Boston, I had a chance to become a program director at my college station, and then a commercial station picked me up. And all of a sudden, I changed from being an accountant and marketing specialist into radio. I got a job at NBC, and, the rest is part of my long journey. I've been hired and fired by all the best companies. And, it took me about 20 years to realize if you're not at the table, you'll be on the menu. Eventually, these corporations are going to get rid of you or going to stop your progress. And I made moves. I worked at AOL when, they started doing. So it's been a long journey of ups and downs, and a lot of downs, I got to admit, because, I was crushed when I got fired from BET. I did everything. I brought them from the bottom in the ratings up to the top, and then they got sold to Viacom. And it sort of changed my focus in terms of some of the things that I wound up doing.
I know you took a stand at BET. There were, you write in your book particularly that there was a song and a young girl wrote to the station and said, well, why is this, profane song, being played? And you took a stand and said, you know what, we're not going to play those types of songs anymore. And obviously that didn't go in your favor and you were terminated. But, that obviously, like you said, was a crushing defeat. How did you pick yourself up? I mean, most people, they'd be done, right? It's so painful, they'd be done.
Yeah, and it's easy to be done in this business. I've had so many people come and go. I've had friends die. One of my best friends, George Howard, had 9 albums out and just lost his life from stress and then got sick. And so many people that started big ended. It's hard to survive in the music business and entertainment, at least, during my years. And I've taken different jobs. I started in radio, went to television. Then I became a board member at Parents Television Council. Then I did voiceovers and agency work in New York, and back into radio and back into television. You just, different strokes for different folks, but I never settled for the 9 to 5.
So I know that, you listed all the ways that you survived, but like, emotionally, spiritually, that takes a really strong person to do what you did, right? So how were you able to like have that mindset of, you know what, I'm a survivor, I'm going to get through this?
Well, The one thing the reason why I wrote the book, I wanted to be honest. I can't say it was easy. I've been evicted from apartments. I lost my home. I started over like 3 times in life. So it's never easy, but and there were times in the 80s when I snorted Peru. Cocaine was popular and everything else. So I've got over a lot of things in a long time, but I have to admit it's been fun because I've wrote my own story.
So you say it's never easy, but so what's the but? How did you get through the not easy?
To prove people wrong. Everybody thought I was a disruptor, but it's telling the truth. When you tell the truth in this business, you get hurt a lot. Because people don't want to hear it.
I would have to imagine in all of the highs and the lows. I mean, you were homeless at one point. Like you said, you were partying hard, you were snorting cocaine, you were, you were living that entertainment lifestyle. Were you at peace with yourself while you were doing that?
Yeah, because I've always tried to help people. People help me along the way. The proof in your legacy is not how much money you made, how much change and how many people you've inspired to do great things. And that's what I look at. I feel like a basketball coach. If you have some great players on your team, sometimes that circumvents some of your losses. And
Absolutely.
every time it makes me feel good when things aren't going good.
I mean, and you talk about like that major support system. You said you had wonderful mentors and people who lifted you up, and there in turn, you want to lift other people up. You also have a quote in the book that says, "Nevertheless, in my life, whenever one door closes, another miraculously opens." So what do you attribute those doors to opening at the right time? When you were in your lowest lows, I mean, in your book, it's like, bam, something eventually happens and you are just on that way up. Why are those doors opening for you? What's going on?
Well, I think because I leave the door open. Yeah, basically, I'm not scared to try different things. When I was in DC, there was a guy named Adolph Caesar, real famous actor, voiceover guy. He was in The Color Purple and a lot of great movies. And he was the father of one of my teammates. So for years, Uncle Adolph would tell me, do voiceovers, get off the radio, blah, blah, blah. He was the voice of ABC in the 80s, making a lot of money. And when I got fired one time, I called him and said, look, Uncle Adolph, he told me to take some lessons with Beta Mark Antonio, $150 an hour. I went to New York for an audition. I said 6 words, AT&T, it's all within your reach. I got paid $65,000 in 60 days.
Wow.
And then I understood what he was telling me for years, do voiceovers, but my ego couldn't take voiceovers because I'd be rejected sometimes. In the voiceover world, you go out for 25 auditions, you might get one, but that one's a big payday, so that sort of opened up my eyes. I didn't want to work at AOL. I was on camera, blah, blah, blah. But I've been open and learned that, some things end. The great career that I started at NBC, I thought I was going to be there for 40 years. But it ended. Stations get sold, people change their mind. And if you're not in control of your destiny, it's up to somebody else. So how are we going to adapt? I got to learn how to adapt.
So was there a moment or an experience where it was kind of like that aha moment where you realized you had to put your ego aside and your ego was actually preventing you from achieving your best life?
It's funny. About 2 years ago, when I got fired from BET, my boss who fired me 60 days before and then dodged me for 60 days. I never saw him in the building again. If he saw me, he would walk through. And then we were in a Clubhouse room, a social media app. First time, talked to him in 20 years. And I realized then when we were in this room talking that I'm not his enemy. I let that pain go. And the funny thing that Stephen Hill said to me, he's in charge of the Billboard Awards now. He admitted in that phone call it was his problem. He admired me. I was his favorite person in terms of radio. And I used to call myself the captain. And not until 20 years later did I know this story. And I held it to myself. But anyway, it was his problem. So sometimes you don't know other people's problems. And, it takes time. It's always not you. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think we always take rejection and bad things very personally, which prevents us, I think. So that phone call 2 years ago, when you were finally able to free yourself from that past, what was that like for you?
There was this book, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And that was another transforming book for me, that I realized that all my problems are not my problem. There was a point where I was bald. I was going bald. Do I look like I'm going bald?
No, you do not.
I was bald when I worked in DC because of the stress,
Wow.
working for somebody else. I was kicking butt in DC, had a top 5 station. And when I left there, my hair started growing back. And I started to realize that it's not that serious. There's family, loved ones. And of course you got to make a living, but you can't live like your job is your life. Your job is not, it's a job.
That's true. So it's funny because you bring up The Power of Now. I'm actually reading it myself.
Oh, really?
I am. So what was it particularly transformative? I'm just curious. What was like that? Because there's a lot of nuggets of wisdom from that book, but what was it that really resonated with you?
It just showed me that, the person that gave it to me is probably the world's best jazz singer on the planet. Her name's Rochelle Farrell. And I was going through a dark time. And she said, the great thing about this book, you don't have to read the whole book. You can read a page and get something out of it. And I would read a page, 2 pages, and everything sort of took the pressure off you and made you understand that other people have issues in their life. And even though they look strong and look like they're in control, they're making mistakes too, so don't take their mistakes. And it just gave me a better pride about myself. I was always challenged by, just people and intimidated. Like, I'm 6'3", deep voice. All my bosses were 5'6". And, Bob Johnson, the billionaire from BET, all his vice presidents, I remember I went into a room, they were all like 5'8". And I was like, oh, damn, the big black man syndrome. So anyway, it's different things. And The Power Now was that book that sort of made me realize that it's, take this weight off your shoulders. You don't have to carry this burden forever. And there's other steps of progress.
Yeah, and like you said,
yeah,
and like you said, it's not always you. People are dealing with their own issues, and they could be projecting those issues onto you, their own insecurities onto you. And I feel like, I don't know if it's human instinct or whatever, that we internalize what people are trying to put forth, even if it's not, even if it's a false narrative, but we accept it as truth, and then that becomes a problem.
Look, I'm going to be 65 this year. I've seen it all. You know what I mean? And the process doesn't stop. It really doesn't. The learning process, at least in media for me.
And, you called yourself a disruptor. You took a stand, obviously, in particular with that one incident at BET. When you reflect, and I know you did so in your book, but as you reflect on those 40 years in the entertainment and the music industry, what has been your biggest takeaway? What's your biggest takeaway from all of that?
Ownership, controlling, being the person in the room. Like, one of the guys I went to school with in college was the New York bureau chief for CNN. and seeing his journey and my journey. And it happens, but they're rare and far in between.
Well, Paul, thank you so much. We're running out of time here, but I thank you for sharing your experience and your perspective. If people wanted to know more about your book or where to get it, how would they do that?
Social media, you can find me at Music Biz U, Bizu, Music Biz U. The book is on all platforms, Amazon, and it's called Blackout, My 40 Years in the Music Business. And you don't even have to buy the book. You can Google C-SPAN gave me 90 minutes. If you Google C-SPAN Blackout Paul Porter, you'll see a 90-minute special from DC that I talk about the same thing. I don't make money off of books. Amazon pays me $3 for every $20 book. So,
oh, well, there you go.
yeah,
Again,
I learned that afterwards too. It's a learning story. Yeah,
it's a learning story. Well, thank you, Paul.
hey,
And
thank
I
you.
mean, you've had such a journey, and I think people are going to glean a lot from you sharing your experiences, kind of the lessons that you've learned. So I appreciate you taking the time.
And it's not over yet. It never stops. That's the beauty. I sent you my trading card yesterday. I've been working with kids in South Florida teaching, and they made me a trading card and put me in a museum. So it never stops, man. That's the beauty of life. Don't stop. Don't retire.
I
All
love
right?
that. That is the perfect way to end this. It never stops. Keep on going.